have a gift. You have a passion for creation. There's something inside you that wants to express itself, and that something has led you to explore the world of visual effects, a place where magic happens, and the only limitation is your imagination. All the greatest artists in the world started somewhere, learning and growing into the people they are today. You being here is the first step to building your legacy as an artist. Learn from the best and brightest in the real-time visual effects community. Sharpen your skills and be your best self. Hey everybody, today's episode features an interview with Bill Kladis. He is a wonderful teacher and technical artist out in the field with Epic Games right now. Like many others, I got my start in visual effects watching his tutorials on Unreal for particle systems and shaders and so many other great things through InViewFX. So I'm super excited to be able to sit down and talk to him about where he's been, where he's going, and just this crazy experience of life and how visual effects has really changed the industry because of his efforts. With that said, let's jump in.
Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Hey everybody, I've got Bill Kladis here, technical artist and visual effects guru at Epic Games, and he's also known for running his own company at InViewFX way back in the day. Bill, how you doing today, man?
I'm good and healthy. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. It is 9:00 at night here on a Sunday here in Dallas, Texas, and it's pretty dark outside right now. I know we had a lot of rain come through this weekend.
Mm-hmm. It's coming here now. It's going to ruin my biking all this week. So I'm going to be indoors more.
Bill, I would love to hear all about the crazy journey that you've had in visual effects over the past, 10, 20 years, really in this kind of legendary state. But I really want to start at the beginning. How did you get started in visual effects?
Do you want the really long answer or the kind of abbreviated version?
Whichever one you want.
I'll try to give you the in between. I went to college with the intent of trying to get into visual effects and film. At the time, I'm getting pretty old. At the time, this is 2001. This is the days of PS2, and I think Xbox just came out or was around the corner. So I wasn't really like visual effects in games, I don't even think was a defined career. And I wasn't really inspired by anything that I was seeing in games, right? All of the really cool, innovative stuff and inspiring stuff was happening in film. So I went to school, didn't really get any jobs out of college related to film. I was actually kind of breaking in a little bit towards doing post-production stuff. So post-production would be a lot of stuff for TV, like TV commercials, web series and stuff like that. And it was kind of entry-level beginning stuff.
You remember
beginner's work, but
what films or movies were coming out around that time? What was it, 2001, that were kind of inspiring you and being like, oh, I want to do stuff like that?
I could tell you I'd have to go even earlier into like the 90s, where like the spark ignited. I mean, I'm old enough to remember having seen Jurassic Park in the theater. I think that was maybe one of the first ones. Actually, the real one that I just watched over and over was Starship Troopers. And Starship Troopers, that movie holds up in terms of the visuals so well. Right. And part of it is because rendering hard surfaces like that, like the bugs. I don't remember what they're even called in the movie, but I'll just call them the bugs. They did that so well. It was just the tracking with real footage was perfect. The rendering, the lighting, like all the goop for the blood as they're just shooting everywhere. I watched that movie over and over and over, as a kid. So, but anyway, so I got into some small post-production stuff, After Effects work, primarily some Maya stuff. I was pretty desperate. And I just was applying jobs left and right. And I got an offer, or interest, I should say, to do UI work of all things and at a game company in Colorado. And my wife, who was girlfriend at the time, was like, I've always wanted to go to the mountains. Let's go. She was just ready to pick up and leave. So I did it. I took a chance and I did UI art for 3 years almost. And that studio had massive layoffs. I was part of that. It was my first game job and my first layoff. And just down the street, Colorado is not necessarily the Denver area is not a game hub by any stretch. It wasn't at the time Austin was big, or LA, whatever. And there was one other game company in town and they were like hiring for this Lego game. So they were looking for a visual effects artist. I was like, sure. Why not? This is what I originally wanted to do, I guess. It was just kind of this confusing line that I traveled. So they picked me up. So that's how I started as an effects artist in games. And that was in 2000. I'm pretty sure that was 2009.
What a leap. What a leap. Thinking about that transition from film and visual effects and moving into games, there was a big change in how your understanding of visual effects came to be. And as we kind of transition into that real-time aspect, I'm curious, now that you've really spent a lot of time in real-time visual effects, how would you be defining that in your own words if you had to give it, a definition or, sum it up in a couple sentences?
For real-time effects, my perspective, you have to understand when I answer this, is like, I've been doing this so long now. So to me, as someone that's a little more kind of weathered, I'd say it's your scrappiness and your ability to like problem solve. We're at a point now where conceptually what you do in a game engine, like Unreal especially, which I use every day, is not much different or far behind from what people are using in film. Obviously, the longer render times, being able to kick something off to the farm, those things, they can't apply to us because we need to be able to draw a frame in, 16 milliseconds or less. But the tools, the fundamentals, and the concepts are all effectively the same. So it's how clever or scrappy, whatever word you want to use, can you be when you're creating this stuff to create convincing visuals? I think that's what it means to me. We on Fortnite have to, we juggle. I think we support like almost every platform pretty much that exists, console or mobile or otherwise. I think the only thing, someone might correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure the only thing we don't support is Linux, right? Like we do PC, Mac, phones, consoles, PS5. We just announced, I think this week, PS5. We support it. So we have this large breadth of platforms, and a phone is not going to be as powerful as the next gen PS5. So it's that creativeness, being able to juggle all those things, that's really, really important.
Cool. What do you wish that you had known when first starting out in the industry?
That's a really tough question. I struggle answering that. I think from a personal perspective, for my career development, I would say that I definitely underestimated the technical part and the mathematical part. There was just that missing component, all the things that I wanted to do, that I was aspiring to do. Math isn't new, right? And it's not unique to game development. So I wish I had taken more math classes. I wish I had taken it more seriously in college to be able to start learning that and applying it, because it's easy for me once I get it. It's something I can easily apply. I think it was just kind of like that, a little bit of ignorance and a little bit of fear mixed together, because when people think of math, they think of like the professor in front of the chalkboard writing equations, and that's just like this alien language, when it's really not. When you take it down and break it down into little bite-sized pieces. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. For everybody else, this is a bit of a cliche, but I've just learned it painfully over the years, is like this industry never stops moving. You have to constantly be evolving. So I kind of wish I anticipated, like, as I get older, you have less and less desire to keep up. It's like, I got to learn this new thing now, or it's like it's this new method of working. So it gets hard the older you get, right? So that's probably another thing, is like, you can't do this forever. At some point, you just got to figure out a way to stay in this industry, and that's usually through some leadership role, or a lot of people go into academia and teach, once they have a lot of titles under their belt. So, but I'm not there yet. So it's getting harder. That's for sure.
Well, you haven't even peaked 50 yet. You're not even at your halfway mark yet. So you got plenty.
I'm not even in my 40s yet. I know I'm 36 and I'm sounding like I'm 37. I sound like I'm 57 the way I'm talking. I am acknowledging that, but when you have two kids and you're working full time, it adds up quick.
So what's something you're curious about right now? Something that's caught your interest and, you're really paying attention to?
Something that's caught my interest is actually something I think about a lot is deepfakes, because this is, AI, like neural networks, AI learning and all that stuff. Coincidentally, I think NVIDIA just posted this like 2 days ago. It's their Marble demo, and they're using that to upsample, what was it, like a 540p or something image, like a really, really low res image. And they were training it to upres to 1080p by feeding it a couple of images that were like really, really high res that were pre-rendered. So it's already happening in real time in games. And I think it's going to really affect pre-rendered or film and TV stuff first, and even more so. This is actually going to go really deep and dark here. And I'm going to apologize in advance, because I feel like this is one of the things that's going to just change the world, and hopefully not, but I think for the worse in some instances. So what's fascinating about it is that you are just feeding this thing source images to train it, right? There was a movie, I think it's called The Irishman. If you know what I'm talking about, it's Scorsese's film.
Right.
Went straight to Netflix. Mm-hmm. What they did, for those who are unfamiliar, is that they had actors like De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci, who are considerably aged from their prime, in the 80s and so forth. But they wanted to make them look younger. They were doing time lapses, or they were skipping between time in the film, like where they were in jail when they were older. So they were represented by their natural look, which is now. But they were doing, scenes that were supposed to be 30 or 40 years. I can't remember in the past. So I think it was ILM did all these shots. Don't even ask me. I watched a behind the scenes. It was a lot of motion tracking and custom tech because they're all brilliant people. It looked overall great. There were some scenes I remember watching it where it looked a little goofy, but it looked overall great, and they made them look younger. They looked like the younger De Niro and Pesci and Pacino. But that took all these people, and all this time to do that. I think it was a lot of man hours. So now we have this tool. This is the point I'm trying to get at, is that like a few years from now, instead of writing all the software, they're just going to start feeding source images of younger Pesci and De Niro, and just let the computer figure it out, literally. Just be like, here you go. We've got a supercomputer that's going to take a few days and just like take a step and compare it to the previous one and see which one looked better, and like brute force this over and over. When you think about film, there's just so many shots that are done that we don't even realize, because they're doing like CG in like such little minuscule details. Like it could be fog or something like that. It could be snow. Things we don't even perceive as being CG. It's not like some otherworldly alien creature that's fully CG and we know that it's fake, right? All those things, I feel like all those people, men and women who are doing those jobs, I feel like are in danger, because a few years from now, they're just going to start using this neural net technology and just be like, all right, tell it to add some snow or tell it to add some trees to make this forest look a lot more dense, and there's not going to be any more digital matte painting or whatever techniques that they're using, right? So that's the fear for me, right? It's actually going to affect like how we work and employment. I can't even imagine the depths that the changes that's going to make inside of games. Like the NVIDIA demo is the thing that's like really scaring me. Like there's going to be some really big changes and advancements to this.
Right. And, I found that oftentimes there is a fear of change, and especially when technology and waves of new emerging tech come in. You're talking the AI, ML side. But I also find hope, because as jobs get eliminated, new jobs are created in their place. So I'm not too worried about us being out of a job and computers replacing us. I see it as more of an opportunity to augment our abilities, to really streamline our processes. But, the future is uncertain. You're right to be fearful in some capacity.
I admit I'm sounding a little doom and gloomy, and I don't mean to. Good. It's just change, It really is just change is coming, and it's going to be, to me, like pretty revolutionary. This is going to be the same amount of change in magnitude as like just CG, right? There's the quote of, who was it? I want to say it was Dennis Muir, and I'm embarrassed if I'm wrong. He saw, I think, some of the early tests from Jurassic Park. Like he said the quote, he was like, I'm extinct, right? Like he knew that like this was going to be revolutionary and change filmmaking. So I get it. Like it's not going to be the end of the visual effects world or anything like that, and people are going to be losing their jobs left and right. It's just going to be big change.
I think when people had to shift from traditional art and they would be just drawing on like these little film things and they'd have to scan them in. And now everybody's digital, this digital transformation. And it's just a new set of skills that we got to learn. Kind of what you were driving with earlier, Bill. You're constantly learning. The learning never stops. Because if you don't keep up, you're going to lose your competitive edge and you're just going to fall behind everybody else. It's difficult for sure, but that's awesome. You're looking into that kind of stuff and, staying up to date. What was it called again that NVIDIA is doing?
They had a demo. I don't quite remember what the name of it was, but it was just like a ray traced marble demo. And if you remember games like Super Monkey Ball, where it's like you're tilting the world to move the ball around, it was a game modeled after that, where it was a set in somebody's room and they were tilting the objects on the table to get this ray traced little marble to move around.
Cool, man. Cool.
And then they followed. Sorry, I should add, they followed up with it afterwards, where they up-resed images. It was like part of their tensor core flexing that they were doing with how powerful it was. So
yeah, and I'm finding as I learn Python as a programming language myself right now, that there's a lot of applications for data science that jump into the ML and the neural networking that you're saying right now. I'm going to shifting gears here. I was just curious if you could maybe share a personal story about a time where you have, worked on something and you ended up failing at it and how you handle failure.
I'm going to give you maybe a little different answer if that's all right, where it's not about working on something specific, but just failure as like on a personal level in terms of my development and my interactivity with other people. And I'd say, one of my biggest failures is just patience. And I think that's affected me, personally and professionally for a long time. It's something I'm only now addressing as I get older, because I tend to be impatient with myself, for starters. Things like, oh, I should have known that already, or I should already know these things, or I should be at this point, right? So like we put an incredible amount of pressure on ourselves and doubt and so forth. They're all kind of mangled up into this big emotional ball internally.
Wow.
Probably weren't expecting that one, right? But
no, that's deep. And it's so true, Bill. Like we should all practice patience in our daily lives. And remember, smell the roses, take time to look at the sky and realize that we're alive and, we're all doing amazing things. So that's so cool that you're able to kind of like tap into your inner self and, have patience and compassion for yourself, but also for the people that you work with. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. To answer, if you want a more direct question or direct answer to your question.
Okay.
I am working on a personal project that I just cannot figure out how to do something in Niagara, right? Like even working with the people that made it, it just turned into this big, mess of ideas and like, well, I don't really support this, but you can circumvent it by this, right? So I'll tell you this, like for a while, I just stepped away, right? It's a personal project. And I just acknowledge that like, it's okay to just like let things develop, let ideas kind of marinate inside and then come back to it another time. So going back to patience, sometimes you just have a little patience with yourself, I did post some of it on Real-Time Effects actually just the other night. So it's a little like electromagnetic field simulator thing. I had an idea at one point. I was like, oh, it'd be cool to test Niagara's abilities, right?
Ooh, exciting.
So, yeah, it shows promise. It's not done. But another thing that I just,
Are effects ever done? Are effects ever done?
Yeah, though there's that. That's actually very deep right there. And that's very true. You can iterate to death. At some point, you have to know when to walk away. My problem is I tend to walk away when I'm like 90% done or 80% done or something like that. Like, yeah, I'll get back to it later. And then I just let it rot, I need to learn to finish to what my original goals were.
So thinking on that for a second, you're always thinking about your work and also the work of others. When you're looking at that work for visual effects, what are some of the things that you're looking at to let you know when it's good to great, when it's close to being done?
So when looking at others' works, I'm looking for, I think most importantly, coherence. I think as effects artists or tech artists, we have to balance a lot of different things to be able to make a convincing end result. So it can be from animation timing to color balance or color theory, just aesthetics in general, composition. There's a lot of like the title implies, technical artist or effects artist, right? Like you're having to balance all these technical aspects to make something that's visually, beautiful or that elicits emotion or conveys something. So that's the number one thing I'm looking for is like, can this person balance and juggle all these things neatly? I would say past that, again, being in this industry so long, it's harder to impress me than it was 5 years ago, right? Because there's just so much I've seen and I've learned where it's like, cool, that's good work. I also can break down, this is probably how this person made it, right? I'm looking for things that make me go like, wow, how did they do that? Like that is really, really amazing. And I want to know your secrets. Give them to me now, so, and that still happens, like there's a lot of amazing artists that are working and posting all over the web. So those are my nuggets. That's what I'm looking for.
What are some of the trends that you're seeing out across the industry right now?
I mean, in terms of engine stuff, it's pretty clear that everybody for effects is moving towards some kind of node-based editor. We've obviously gotten Niagara. We've got, I'm hating myself for forgetting what it's called in Unity, but it used to be called Shuriken. That's their old editor.
Is it Shader Graph? Is that the name of it?
No, it's, I can't remember, but it's their new particle editor that's node-based, right? And it's similar to Niagara. And, Popcorn Effects, I feel like they were the trailblazers, right, of a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And their biggest hurdle is that they're middleware. As far as I know, they still are, right? So they're not integrated directly with any engine. You have to opt in to buy into them. They were always, in the past years, I'd always watch their videos. To me, they got it. They knew the direction that we were heading. They were trailblazing. They were like their demos that I saw at GDC one year, like just opened up all the possibilities for me of like a freedom for what you can do as an effects artist. So I think that's the trend.
I hear a lot of visual effects artists that are more on the art side advocate and really enjoy the node base because it's very visual and intuitive, versus the technical artist and visual effects tend to prefer the more code heavy or the programming side. Do you agree or disagree with that? And maybe where do you fit onto the equation?
Let me answer with where I fit. I will say that I'm nodes all the way. I think it's super, super easy and intuitive to visualize flow and to iterate on in node graphs. In Niagara, we have Scratchpad now. I think it was released in 4.25, which is like, hey, I just want to quickly, create some kind of math inside of an input or something like that. And it just opens up something that looks like the material editor or the blueprint editor. And it's so fast. You're just like, I just want to do this, like, hey, if this particle's position is, below whatever value on Z, just do this, it's just so quick. I definitely prefer that. I think it's hard for me to look at code. I can look at HLSL and usually figure out what's going on, but it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of gross. That's the only word I can use. It's just gross to look at code. It's like these numbers are trying to represent some kind of visual thing. So it's just easier. Now, to your first point of, do technical artists, you said technical artists tend to do more code stuff, and effects artists that are on the art side like modules. Is that what you're saying?
So kind of what I've discovered, especially talking with lots of people, is that visual effects artists come from all kinds of backgrounds, right? Yeah. So a lot of them are way more interested in the art side, and they typically venture more into like the stylized approach. They enjoy building flip books frame by frame, for instance. There's another, side of it where they're really into the technical stuff. They love the math. They love like trying to create textures procedurally through, the material editor or whatnot. That's kind of how I've seen it. Oftentimes, like, there's different types of visual effects artists that enjoy different parts of the craft as a whole. So just kind of thinking about just where a lot of people in Unity, before like both Shader Forge and Shader Graph came out, you really did have to hard code and learn C++ to implement your effects. And now that's kind of changed over time as we move toward this node-based shader that you just mentioned. Just thinking from that perspective, I'm just wondering, like, I don't know, I forgot my own question.
You were trying to, yeah, that's fine. You were trying to say if I think if I remember correctly, you were saying if the art focused people tend to gravitate towards more graph editor versus code-based editor, or code-based people tend to go writing code by hand, like actually typing.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going.
I don't know if I can make a correlation, honestly. I've been at Epic for so long now, and like we have all these heavy node-based editors, from anything to like blueprints, materials. Now Niagara, even animation editor is all node-based. So I feel like most everybody does. The people that are like coding are usually rendering programmers. And they're the ones that actually do, C++ and HLSL by hand. So that's the correlation I see. It just really depends on your background. People that are usually more programmer centric, obviously usually just come from text. That's just how it goes. I don't ever see a world in the future where hardcore C++ programming is being done with nodes. A lot of programmers in a revolt in that world.
Thanks for navigating that tough question for me.
Sorry.
So I want to move into a bit more of the specifics now. And I wanted to just start by kind of understanding, Bill, what does your visual effects process look like for creating an effect from start to finish? Like, what goes through your mind as you approach something, from scratch?
I'm always just trying to kind of like identify the components is the first thing, like break a visual into parts. Like there's without giving a specific example of what we're trying to recreate, let's just say it's like a floor material or something like that. It's like, okay, well, there is the the transition that's happening, and then there's some kind of secondary element that's enhancing that transition. So just breaking those things up. And then it's just like immediately going through my bag of tricks, of, okay, what do I know in the engine that could equate to satisfying this need, right? If there's a character involved, can I somehow utilize skeleton data or character mesh data or pre-skin data or something like that in the material? If it's, some kind of custom logic, now that we have Niagara, it's like, okay, can I start doing things with blueprints and Niagara and feeding in parameters or something like that? So you'll find with me that I'm extremely engine centric. I tend to try to make everything, even textures, I'll procedurally create them like you were talking about earlier. I'm definitely that guy that's making gradients procedurally, like I'm not making a texture in Photoshop of, a black to white to black gradient. I'm using distance calculations to generate that stuff, or, I've gotten clever enough to actually like generate rounded corners and stuff like that. So that's the highest level answer I can give you without like looking at an effect. If you want to pull something up and we can do some breakdowns, I can definitely do that. But
maybe in another episode,
you'll have to have
we'll get like a panel of like senior VFX artists, and we'll look at one of the contests that they do on the forums. I know they're doing the teleport right now, and we'll look at first, second, and third and be like, what do you think of this? How do you think?
Yeah. I was thinking something like a game show where like I have 15 seconds to answer, and there's like a picture you just keep shifting through. Like, go ahead, how would you do this? And I've just got to like quickly come up with real solutions, and then they have to be judged. I don't know.
What would the prize be? $20 gift certificate to Starbucks. Everybody likes coffee, right?
Sure, I would take it. They're open now, right? We can actually get Starbucks.
Yeah, the drive-thrus are, and mobile order obviously is a big thing.
All right.
It would be interesting if Starbucks started doing delivery. Just bring it to your house.
Mm-hmm. They'd probably make a lot of money, but we'll let them make their decisions on how to handle that.
Hey, so you were in graphic design at one time.
Yeah.
What was that transition like, moving over to visual effects, and how do you think it helped you become a better artist?
Ooh, so all right, a little bit of confession time that I started as a graphic designer because my brother-in-law owned the shop. So it was definitely some nepotism. It was like, hey, it's my brother-in-law. He's of course he's gonna give me a job, and he did. I think it helped me in a number of ways. There was, it was a professional setting, just in general, right? Like getting that experience at such a young age, because I was straight out of high school, was valuable. Just seeing a company run, because it was like an all-in-one print shop. So you wanted business cards, we would design them for you. We had a printing press in the back. We had like a couple color printers too, depending on what you wanted to do. We would actually cut the cards and pack them up and so forth. So like I got to see that whole process from start to end. But it also kind of opened my eyes to the importance of art principles and aesthetics, and even to spacing between letters and things like that, kerning, right? I learned about all sorts of different things. And it also like it opened my eyes to the skills that I had a side inside of me that was really artistic and wanted to create visually, but also just I didn't want to do graphic design. It wasn't something that I was exceptionally talented at. I don't think I had a natural gift for it. So it kind of gave me that motivation to be like, hey, I need to go to school. I want to do something, for myself. The things I learned though, I think, if hindsight's always 20/20 and you kind of connect the dots of the trail that you left behind, it's like, well, all that graphic design work definitely helped me get a job as a UI artist, even though I didn't realize it, right? And helped, how I functioned and performed as a UI artist, because it's a lot of the same principles, right? It just one was on a screen and one was usually printed. So yeah, it helped me enormously. I don't regret it at all.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Not to go too philosophical here, but everything does happen for a reason. And that's what I believe in. Right now, I work in marketing, for instance, and I'm pretty jaded with just the industry of marketing and sales as a whole. But I know the time that I'm putting into this, it's going to come through and help me in my own personal goals or my own ambitions in some capacity or another. So just kind of hearing how you got into graphic design and you had no idea that it would lead to where you are today. it just goes to show that good things come when you put in the effort and the time.
Yeah, and it's also one thing that I want to stress to people. A lot of how I got here is crazy. I never really had a lot of like direct goals. Like I'm going to do this. This is my dream job or dream studio or something like that. A lot of how I ended up here is strictly just like, we'll just see where it goes, right? That was my mentality. And if there was opportunity, especially at a younger age, I almost always took it, even if it didn't seem related. I just was like, you know what? It's just one step down, the road, and it gives you more time to think about, what you need and what you want. If you're somebody that's trying to break in and you're listening to this, like, please don't pin yourself in a corner, because I've seen that happen way too many times. It's okay to kind of step outside the lines that you're trying to walk and to just try something different, even if it's related. You'd be surprised on how you can change and adapt and where it can take you.
And speaking of change, I know that you had started your own company at MUFX at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share that experience?
Yeah, that's going to be a long answer. The whole thing started out of frustration, truly. Like frustration. I wasn't really happy with the job I was at the time. So I had a lot of like pent up like desire to just do something good and on my own terms. And a lot of frustration with, I feel like, what we call real-time visual effects was it in its infancy and kind of developing into this career that people were identifying. I want to say this is like 2011. Like it really was a long time ago. And so many people wanted to know more about it and learn how to do these things. There were some DVDs, like I remember watching I think it was like a Gnomon DVD back in the day. And it was super helpful because I think that was my introduction to Cascade inside of Unreal. But as a whole, I feel like a lot of people would try to learn this, and the most they would get is like some website with some documentation. And it's hard to make a career out of like effectively just a manual, right? Like I'm trying to think of an analogy here. Like I want to be a police officer. Okay, cool. Read this book. And in 2 days, you will be a police officer. It doesn't work like that. So those were some of the frustrations that were the driving factor. I'm very, very humble, almost to a fault, but I will admit, like I am just a natural born teacher. Like I get that. I can explain these things really, really well, especially, if I understand it, I can explain it easily. So I just saw opportunity. I was like, hey, yeah, I can start making these tutorials. I'll be filling a need. I can charge $5 to $10 a pop, and just see where it goes. And so I started off with like a Spark tutorial, I think, if I remember correctly. And I just did that for free, just so people can use that as a guide for the quality that I can provide. Oh, hey, this guy actually knows what he's doing. I can learn from this. And then I started a site and started doing this on the side at home, making these videos. That's how it started. It evolved, had a lot of people that were buying videos. I had like a forum on there for people to answer or ask questions, and I can offer feedback and stuff like that if they wanted to. I think one of the mistakes I did in the beginning was like I closed off the forum as like a paid member exclusive thing to like try to incentivize people to buy tutorials. And it kind of like, it's just like, it's kind of a bad pigeonhole move in hindsight to do that. So I did end up like after not long after, I think like a month or two, I opened it up. So it was just kind of free. From there, I just kept releasing videos, and then we got to the point where I was like, I could do this for a living if I wanted to. And then, companies were interested always in, sending offers to say, hey, we want you to come work here. But I would usually counter back with, well, we're not willing to move, because that's really, really hard to constantly be picking up and moving across the country or potentially the world. So I'd start saying, hey, have you ever considered, just doing freelance? I can contract for you guys, do consulting, whatever you guys want. And it's like 9 out of 10 times they wouldn't even respond back. But that 1 out of 10 times it would turn into a business connection, So it ended up where I had enough clients. I was just like, you know what, I can do this full time. At the time we had to actually leave because I was living in Colorado. And like we were bitten by the recession that happened in 2008, like really, really bad, 2 layoffs in Colorado. So we owned property out there, a condo that we couldn't even live in. We ended up leaving to Chicago. I was like, hey, we can go move back to Colorado and I can just work from home full time. And we took a leap. So I had made it my full-time job. I don't regret it at all for a second. There were a lot of painful lessons that came along the way. I shouldn't even say that. Like there weren't a ton of painful lessons. It was just a lot of damn work. I was in really high demand to make tutorials. Everyone's like, I need, I want to see this. I want to know how to make this. And I had the desire to. Good tutorials take a lot of time. They take a lot of damn time, probably to a fault. Like I used to plan them, I think, too much. That was one of my mistakes I made. I should have been more organic and okay to make mistakes on video or on the mic while I'm driving, right? I wanted these videos, these tutorials to be like perfect, like never skipping a beat, and you know what I mean? Like it, like just flowing like a beautiful song or a river, like that's the kind of professionalism I went to. So that was one of my mistakes.
I imagine you did like lots of rehearsals before even getting to the recording phase.
Too many rehearsals. Yeah. That was a big mistake. So that was one thing. I acknowledged pretty quickly that I was underwater because like trying to do all these, people on tutorials. And then like at one point, I seriously think I had like 4 clients I was doing work for. I was working like 70-hour weeks, man. I worked my butt off.
Were you doing this all by yourself? You didn't have anybody on staff with you to help?
Oh, that's exactly what I was getting at. So I started trying to look for people, and I was putting out ads like on the FX group on Facebook and some other places. On the positive, that's how I met Fred Huber, who I consider a good friend. He's also an FX artist. He works for NVIDIA now, and he's also I feel like a natural teacher. He has that desire to like bring people together and push them to learn. So I did get help. Fred was making videos. Fred, we shared profits. I gave him, most. I got to watch my mouth here. I'm pretty sure I gave him most. We weren't making a ton of money selling these like $10 videos or whatever, but I'm pretty sure I gave him most of everything. I just had to cover like my costs for like hosting these gigantic, 4 gigabyte video downloads, which was not cheap. That was another big nightmare, which I won't talk about right now, was file hosting, but it was hard. Like there weren't a lot of Freds to be frank about it. Like I put out calls and I'd get somebody that's like, yeah, cool, I'm interested. But then that's like, oh yeah, my work said I can't do this. Or yeah, I'm interested, but I'm a student. It's like, okay, well, we want people with experience, So it was really, really just like it's hard to find good effects artists in the industry, period, to work. I think it's a little easier now. It seems like the industry's fleshed out a little more. It's really hard to find people that can do this stuff on the side. If they're good, they're already probably working and they don't have the desire to work a couple hours at home every night making these videos.
I can only speak right now, but I feel like there's a huge demand for visual effects artists, but they're looking for senior people that can hit the road running already with 5 years of experience, where the supply right now is all junior. They're people that are hungry to learn and to really grow, but they're just not getting a chance to get in because they're not good enough. That's that catch-22, right?
I was just going to say catch-22. Yeah. I don't, if we talk about, advice to beginners, it's like, make yourself stand out. That's the hard part. Like the cards are stacked against you already, like if you want to be picked up by a big company early on, like you've got to shine, plain and simple. So, but yeah, so going back to the running a company, it was hard to find other people. I was constantly overloaded with work. I enjoyed the freedom of hopping back and forth between projects, working between different clients. So it was great to be like, for example, I did work on, I think it was Orcs Must Die, one of the games. It's like, oh, cool, I'm doing Orcs Must Die stuff. And I was doing work for, that's how I actually met with Epic. I was doing stuff for their content packs. Cool, I'm doing stuff for Epic. That's awesome, today. Like, so it's kind of like, you just kind of felt baller. I don't know. That's the only way to put it, like you just felt like a badass, The flip side of that was good art takes time. So like I was able to produce quality work, but I was working really quickly. I never felt like I could like hone in on things a lot of times because I was always just like, they have effect X, Y, and Z that needs to be done in, 5 days by the end of the week. So it's like, you just got to get it done. Right. Mm-hmm. So I was stretched thin to put it very simply.
Now, I know you mentioned you had kids. Do you have kids while you were going through all this as well? Or were you pre-kids?
Yes. So
at the time.
Here's now you're going to go down the... I think it's good we talk about this because if there's somebody that's actually considering this, they should hear my experience, right? It started without kids. We just had 2 dogs. And then I made the leap into full-time, self-employed. It really wasn't that long ago. So I'm wondering why I'm having a hard time remembering. Was our oldest born? And then I started. Give me a second I got to think about this. I got to put some memories together. Yeah. So, okay. So right as my oldest was born, I made the leap, which is really scary because I had to also buy like my own health insurance too. And for anybody that has kids, you all know how often you are going to the doctor, especially with a newborn, right? Like I paid like $800 a month for like the most garbage insurance ever. Somehow I still, like, every time I went to the doctor had like gigantic copays. And I was just like, I'm not trying to turn this political, but I'm like, what is going on here? Our healthcare system is broken, Yeah, that was hard, right? We were like, my wife was working, so we were paying for daycare. And when you're self-employed too, you don't get paid for days off. Like you bill usually hourly or daily, like you have a day rate. So if you want to take that vacation for a week, that's a week of no money and no income. I mean, tutorial sales don't pay my mortgage, like I'll be very clear about that. Like it probably could have if I devoted my time strictly to that and was like, it's a machine that like you have to constantly feed when it comes to tutorials, where you make a good amount of money, like very nice money in like the first 2 or 3 days. And then like if you look at the sales graph, it's like the ping pong. It's like, it just drops and it just does these little bounces after. That's not livable income. That's like some nice extra money at most. So that was a lot of like that's kind of like when all the gears started to grind and the whole machine started stopping because we had a newborn. Insurance was super, super expensive. And then like my dog ended up getting cancer. And like, it was like messy. I won't get into details, but it was messy. And I had to like pay dog surgeries are not cheap. So it was like thousands of dollars on top of not working for like a few days. And that hit me. I remember that hitting me specifically like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my God, this is not sustainable. Like I put money aside for stuff like this in the thousands of dollars, which seemed like a lot to me at the time, which it wasn't nearly enough. Because that just evaporated like in a week. I was like, oh my God, this is really bad. What if I got sick with the flu even, for a week? Like I'd be effed. So those were the times where like, I remember specifically we were talking to my wife. I was like, this is going to be hard. Like we need to start figuring out like maybe something full-time, and Epic was really pushing me to come work there full-time. So that was one of the major motivating points to finally just kind of dropping it, being self-employed and, going back to a full-time career.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Bill. It really shows that we do need to be flexible in our lives and understand that circumstance will often change the way that we live. So we have to be willing to pivot to meet the health and safety and well-being of ourselves and our loved ones.
Priorities change, lives change, people change, time changes everything,
I want to pivot and talk on a couple more things. I know we're going a little over time here, but there's just so much that you have to offer. And I
told you I rambled, man. Yeah. I warned you.
Just got a few more questions and then we'll jump into the lightning round.
Sure.
I know you went to school at Columbia College in Chicago. Some people are always wondering, should I go to, university? Should I not? What were some of the lessons that you took away that helped you in your visual effects career?
The experience is valuable. It's unfortunate because schools can be really, really expensive. So it's not just affordable and accessible for everybody. But I would overall recommend it. I think it does help give you a little bit of structure. I think that was something I needed at the time. I think probably one of the most important lessons is just teamwork. It really teaches you that you need to rely on others. I think that's something that I was bad at when I was younger. Just tried to be, Mr. Hotshot, do it yourself. You're on top of everything, So that's an important takeaway that you can get from college. And on the other side of that, a lot of teachers just weren't prepared with the content they were teaching. So it also was teaching us to be like, we've got to like go on our own and like start learning this a little more too. So it puts that fire under your feet. I had some amazing teachers that were, working in the post-production scene in Chicago that like taught me well. One of my teachers was ex-Midway, which ironically I ended up working at NetherRealm, which was the evolution of Midway because I think Midway went bankrupt. And then WB Games bought them, I think around 2009 or something like that. 2006, maybe it was. And they rebranded it, the Chicago studios, NetherRealm. That's the Mortal Kombat studio. And I worked there for a few years, So it's such a small industry, so weird to be like, oh yeah, remember so-and-so? He was my teacher in school, So like, there were some really, really talented people there, and especially a lot of 2D animators. But anyway, to get to the point though, it's like the one thing he taught me, that a teacher specifically that he said that I'll never forget, he's just like, look around. He's like, these are your coworkers and these are also your enemies when it comes to trying to apply for a job. He's like, if there's a job opening here, you're all applying against each other. And he's like, you're applying against me too. If I need a job, I've got all this experience. What do you bring? So that's what I was saying earlier about people are trying to break in. It's like cards are stacked against you. You got to start like, you've got to be scrappy. You've got to be like taking your own initiative and like really pushing yourself to stand out. Those are the things that I learned from school, some of the lessons.
Awesome. Who are some of your role models that inspire you? And they don't have to be visual effects. It could be anyone.
I thought about this hard, like we did this math class online recently at Epic. It was Wyeth and a guy named David Hill, and his title is Principal Mathematician, which just sounds so elegant, But I think David's is a role model, and I also consider him a friend. We hang out. The dude's like brilliant when it comes to mathematics stuff. He wrote all this crazy film fluid sim stuff. Like any question you ask him about math, he just is like, oh yeah, it's this, but there's just so much more to him. Like his demeanor, he's just so chill. I make this joke all the time that he's the Bob Ross of math. And it's like so true, because you can be like, look at this elegant triangle, Bill. There's so much we can learn about these triangles. That's how he talks. So that's the takeaway I get from him is like, when I ask him questions, he's very like just patient and methodical. Like, let's understand it. Okay, cool. Let's break it down. And he writes down, the equations. So he's helped me with countless questions. I'm just, on his own time. So he's a role model. When I teach, I feel like that's who I want to be. That kind of just like, without rambling too much, I know I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do it. We tend to be afraid to ask questions a lot of times, right? Out of that fear of like, so-and-so is going to think I'm dumb if I ask, like, why didn't I know that? Going back to like, I'm hard on myself, it's that self-doubt. He never does that. Like he takes the time out of his day to just be like, I'm going to teach you. This is rudimentary stuff to me, but I'm going to teach you, so you can learn, so you can grow. So he's been a mentor, for me, somebody I really look up to. So some things I try to take away from.
Let's get into the lightning round. Quick and easy questions, just like visual effects. Are you ready?
Hold up. Have we gone like an hour? Are you going to have to cut this up into 2 parts?
We'll cram it in, and the magic of editing, we'll cut it down.
All right.
What is a perfect one-day getaway in Holly Springs, North Carolina, and the surrounding area?
I'm a big mountain biker, so going up to some of the trails out here. Brumley is probably one of my favorites. What's the other one? Uwharrie it's a little bit more of a drive. Uwharrie is really fun. That's probably about an hour and a half away. So those are the things I do that on my own. Family stuff is like more kind of boring. Taking kids to the kids museums and, going to eat dinner and stuff like that. But
what video game or app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
That's another mountain biking related thing. I've been using Strava a lot lately. I've been harassed by friends to use it for years, and I've just kind of been like begrudgingly against it. And I'm finally using it now, and I'm having way too much fun. I'm kind of sad I've waited this long.
What does it do?
It's an app. So it's a workout app in general. It's not just for biking, but it's an app for like just tracking your workouts. But the reason it's really cool and it's powerful is that it'll actually aggregate everybody's workouts, and you can go on their site and like look at heat maps. So you can actually see where people are working out. So you can say, show me where people are biking. So we have in my backyard, literally behind me is like thousands of acres of forest, and it's just undeveloped. And there's all these trails that people have been building, and we're starting to build them now. So it's great to just pull up this app and be like, look at the heat map. Like somebody's sketching, is etching out a trail here, and it looks like it's getting pretty heavy use. Let's go check it out, and you can name those sections. And like we have descents that we're all timing. So if you ride those sections, it'll actually time it automatically for you. And it does a leaderboard. So like we're all fighting each other for king of the mountain to try to do this downhill section, right? And I was 4th yesterday, and now I'm 7th. Like it keeps changing.
I love those apps that add that gamification, that friendly competition kind of like thing to your daily workout, because it really gives you like a goal to work towards, even if the goal isn't to get number one. And for the listeners, like me and Bill are on webcam right now, and now I'm looking at his triceps, and I'm thinking, this guy is built. He's working. He's buff. He definitely gets a lot of exercise.
I don't know about that. My legs are in good shape because I cycle so much, but I think this is just maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's from descending. Maybe I built a little bit of muscles from descending.
What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
Any kind of, I just love food, period. But I think my favorite is any kind of Asian cuisine, Eastern Asian stuff. So we love sushi, hibachi, like the teppanyaki is always a big hit with the kids. Korean, like the hot stone bibimbap, I can eat that all day. Thai food, Indian food. Like I just love Asian food. So definitely that.
What is your favorite podcast or book you've listened to recently?
I do not read at all anymore. It's kind of a shame. My wife just bought, and I do want to read it, is The Survivor. I think it's called The Survivor Story. And it's based off of, they've got the new TV show on Netflix for the Waco siege that happened in Texas in the 90s. So we just watched all the episodes, and I kind of want to read his take on it. So does that count that I'm saying there's a book I want to read?
Okay, that's fair enough.
Sorry, I'm boring in that aspect.
Avatar: The Last Airbender just came out on Netflix, so now I want to go read the books myself, just for some nice fiction to relax. So I totally get it, where like the movie inspires you to read rather than vice versa.
I could tell you books I've read in like a long time ago, if that helps, if that counts. There's actually, speaking of movies, there's the Prestige, which is one of my favorite books. And I can actually boast and say I read the book before the movie. It wasn't the other way around. But that was the one about magicians. And they did the movie with Christian Bale. And who's Wolverine? Hugh Jackman. It's Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman. The book is amazing. It was a really, really good book. That was like 10, 15 years ago.
Favorite video game visual effect you're jealous of that isn't your own?
So I had to think about this for a long time. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. It's Simon Trumpler. He's got the umlauts under the U, so I don't know if I'm saying that. But he posted this effect recently on the real-time effects site, and it's this like green goop. Like it looks like toxic waste coming out of a sewer pipe, and it's like spilling into like a vat. And it just like, it hits all my buttons perfectly when it comes to an effect. The reason I'm jealous is because he did this like tiling mesh for the goop that's falling out of the sewer pipe. And it's like, I say this totally innocently, but I'm like, oh, I thought of that first. You know, like something I've always wanted to do is like a tileable mesh. I've just never done it, right? But the execution is awesome. It also kind of like hits my, what I call like the core, kind of like the color of effects. Like I love bright neon colors. Like I grew up with a Super Soaker, you know, it's like that lime green, you know, almost kind of yellow green, toxic waste, anything like that kind of like deep neon green or red or orange always just gets me excited. So I love that. And he's doing like some stuff where the mesh is hitting the vat. It's got like some undulation, but he's recalculating the normals really well. So it's like shading perfectly. Like it's just like a really, really well done standalone piece.
You must have been a big fan of that show on Nickelodeon, Double Dare.
Yes, it's very Double Dare goopy, like the slime or the goop or whatever they called it. Yeah. So it just scratches the effects itch for me, you know. So it's really well done.
I love Simon, and I hope to get him on here someday in the future. So best advice for first-time visual effects artists or people looking to get into the industry?
You know, like I was just saying earlier, don't be afraid to take opportunities, even if they don't line up with exactly, you know, what you've envisioned. Again, not trying to sound harsh, but like the cards really are stacked against beginners. Like you've got to stand out. So learn where you can. There's a lot more resources now than there were when I started. Really, really be open to people's feedback, and please embrace how ridiculously small this industry is. I've seen it a few times where people have kind of put their foot in their mouth and have made a bad name for themselves. So be nice, be courteous. If somebody says something you don't agree with feedback wise, just politely ignore it and say thank you, you know.
Awesome, Bill. It has been a pleasure to be able to chat here. I just want to ask, is there any final thoughts or things you want to plug? Anything you want to promote that maybe you're working on, or any work out there that you want people to go check out? Most everything I'm doing is under wraps, unfortunately, so I can't share, but I will say that Unreal Engine just announced Unreal Engine 5 as a tech demo. We've got a video that just got posted earlier in this week. So if you haven't seen that, please go check that out just to kind of get a glimpse of the new rendering technology and what the future's holding, you know, because in the video you can see they're talking about, you know, really, really high poly count budgets, you know, and global illumination with, you know, light bounce happening and so forth in real time. So think about, you know, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be making for content for in the coming years. So I would check that out. We've got, I think it's 4.25 was released maybe last week. I hope I have the number right. I'm pretty sure it's 4.25. That has a substantial number of improvements for Niagara in terms of user interface and usability. So I would definitely encourage people to open those up, mess around with existing content, look at content examples, ask questions on the Epic forums, on the real-time effects forums, get people, if you get stuck on something, just ask, you know, it's the best way to learn. And if anybody just wanted to get in touch with you and just, bounce ideas or ask questions, as you said, is there a place that they can contact or reach you?
I think probably the best bet would be on the Real-Time Effects site. I'm on there as ImbueFX. It's just like my old handle from my company. So just send me a message on there or tag me in a post. I think you can do that, right? You can @ somebody. So it's IMBUEFX. That's just my username. So
yeah. And right now, Bill's got an awesome forum thread going on showing all of these awesome effects that he's been working on, all these really cool techniques that he's been sharing. So definitely go check that out, guys. And of course, message him if you've got questions.
Yeah, I'm always happy to help. As long as I got time. I usually make it though. So
thanks again, Bill, for your time today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was awesome chatting.
Thank you so much for listening to this awesome episode with Bill today. I hope you got some value out of it. If you have any other questions for Bill, feel free to reach out to him on Real-Time VFX forums. His tag name is UFX. The key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, do what you love. If you find yourself in a bad place, don't just accept it. Go ahead and take action to make things better. Key takeaway number 2, the bar is set high for visual effects artists, so you have to work hard and put in that work to get where you want to be. And things are constantly in motion, and in order to compete, you've got to be constantly learning to keep up. Key takeaway number 3, be patient. Be patient with yourself and others. Realize that everything doesn't need to get done in one day, because when you practice compassion and empathy, you can lead a balanced and healthy mental life. I had a wonderful time in this interview, and we've got another great one coming up next week. This one is going to be with Matt Schwartz. He is a VFX artist at Riot Games, recently finished up with the expansion for Legends of Runeterra. So that's going to be so exciting to talk about. Of course, you can always connect with me and share some feedback, thoughts, episode ideas, anything you want at my email, travismccollum86@gmail.com, or feel free to ping me in the forums or on the Real-Time Visual Effects Discord. If you're wondering how to get information for that, just jump on the forums or ping anyone that you'd like, and they'll be able to help you out. Anyway, guys, until next time, rock on.